The CH-47 Chinook touched down at Forward Operating Base Rhino in a storm of Afghan dust, its rotors churning the pre-dawn air into a brown cyclone that forced every operator on the landing zone to shield their eyes. The bird had barely settled when the rear ram dropped, and a single figure emerged carrying a custom rifle case and a weathered assault pack. Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexander Reyes stepped onto the hardpan, her boots finding purchase on Afghan soil for the 43rd time in her career. She stood 5'7", her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun beneath her tan ball cap, her frame lean but unremarkable against the hulking special operators scattered across the FOB. She wore no rank insignia, no unit patches. Her multicam uniform bore only a subdued American flag on her right shoulder and a name tape that simply read Reyes. She looked, to anyone watching, exactly like what she wasn't. "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." The voice came from 30 feet away, where a cluster of operators in various stages of kit-up had paused to observe the new arrival. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Drake, a massive SEAL with 18 years of combat operations behind him, stood at the center of the group with his arms crossed over his plate carrier. "They sent us a PAO," Drake announced to his team, using the acronym for Public Affairs Officer. "Outstanding. We need shooters, and they send us someone to update the Instagram." Laughter rippled through the group. A younger operator, Petty Officer First Class Tommy Chun, cupped his hands around his mouth. Hey, miss. The USO 10 is back that way. You're in the wrong area." Alex didn't acknowledge them. She walked toward the Tactical Operations Center with the measured stride of someone who had long ago stopped caring about the opinions of strangers. Her rifle case bumped against her thigh with each step, the custom Pelican shell containing a weapon that had ended 96 lives across 7 theaters of operation. They didn't know that. They couldn't know that. Everything about Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexander Ghost Reyes was classified so deep that her service record in the regular databases showed her as an administrative specialist assigned to a supply depot in Maryland. The real record, the one that lived only in a SCIF at Joint Special Operations Command, told a very different story. But here, now, walking across the packed earth of FOB Rhino, she was just another female in a war zone. Just another target for men who had never served beside women in combat and didn't believe they ever should. "Maybe she's a journalist," another operator offered, "doing a piece on what real warriors look like." "Nah, look at her boots," Drake said. "Those are worn. She's been somewhere. Probably a FOB bunny, hopping around taking notes for some general." Alex reached the TOC and pushed through the door without looking back. Inside, the air conditioning hit her like a blessing from a god she'd stopped believing in 3 deployments ago. The operations center hummed with activity. Intelligence analysts hunched over laptops, communications specialists monitoring encrypted feeds, and at the center of it all, a holographic terrain map of the Karengal Valley that would have looked like science fiction a decade earlier. If that opening hooked you, stay with me. This story only gets heavier from here. Subscribe now for more war stories like this, and hit that notification bell. Now, let me show you what happened when the most dangerous sniper in American history walked into a room full of men who thought she was a joke. Commander James Morrison stood at the holographic display, his silver-streaked hair and weathered face marking him as a man who had seen the worst of warfare and made peace with it. He was a senior SEAL commander in this AO, a living legend whose career stretched back to Panama and forward through every sandbox America had fought in since. He turned as Alex entered, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just surprise. "You made it," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the OC. "Traffic was light, sir." A ghost of a smile crossed Morrison's face. "I heard you had a welcoming committee outside. They seem friendly. They're going to feel very differently in about 12 hours. Morrison gestured toward a private briefing room off the main operations floor. "Step inside. We need to discuss your role before the full mission brief." Alex followed him through the door, which sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss. The room was small, dominated by a conference table and another holographic projector. Morrison pulled out a chair and sat heavily, his eyes never leaving her face. "How much do you know about Operation Righteous Thunder?" he asked. "I know I was pulled off a priority mission in Syria because someone at JSOC decided you needed a long gun on this one. I know the target package must be significant if they're burning me to get me here. She set her rifle case down carefully. And I know your operators outside think I'm here to serve coffee. Morrison's jaw tightened. They don't know who you are. They can't know who you are. Your identity, your record, my existence. Alex finished for him. Yes, sir. I'm aware of my own classification status. 96 confirmed kills across 7 theaters, Morrison said quietly. Longest shot in the history of American Special Operations. 2 distinguished service crosses that will never appear in any citation. You saved 16 of my people in Raqqa 3 years ago, and not one of them knows your name. He paused. They call you the Angel Sniper. They think you're a myth. Alex said nothing. There was nothing to say. Her career had been extraordinary precisely because it didn't exist. A female sniper operating at the highest levels of special operations would have been a political lightning rod, a media sensation, a propaganda target. So she had been erased from the official record, her achievements attributed to units that didn't exist, her face never photographed, her name never spoken in any room that wasn't classified. She was a ghost, and ghosts don't need recognition. The mission, she said, bringing them back to purpose. Morrison nodded, activating the holographic projector. A 3-dimensional model of a compound materialized above the table, a fortified structure nestled into a valley surrounded by steep ridgelines. This is where we're going tomorrow night. The holographic compound rotated slowly, revealing layers of detail that Alex studied with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to read terrain the way others read books. Defensive walls, guard towers, multiple structures, approach routes that all funneled into kill zones. Whoever had designed this place understood warfare. Hamid al-Rashid, Morrison said, pulling up a photograph alongside the terrain model. The face that appeared was surprisingly ordinary, a middle-aged man with a graying beard and intelligent eyes. AQ's new strategic commander for the entire region. We've been hunting him for 18 months. 3 days ago, we finally confirmed his location. He'll be gone within the week, Alex observed. Exactly. We have a 48-hour window before he moves again, and we've got approximately 0 chance of reacquiring him after that. This is it. This is a shot. Alex studied the compound approaches. Ground assault. 2 SEAL platoons, a Ranger QRF on standby, 2 Apaches for SAES, and AC-130 providing overwatch. Morrison zoomed in on a ridgeline that overlooked the compound from the north. But none of that matters without this position. The ridge resolved into clearer detail. Alex immediately understood its significance. The elevation provided direct line of sight into the compound central courtyard and covered every approach route. Anyone standing on that ridge with the right rifle could control the entire engagement. 1,400 meters to the primary target building, Morrison continued. Variable winds coming up through the valley, temperature differential creating thermal shifts, and a shooting position that exposed a counter-sniper fire from 3 directions. He looked at her. I've got good shooters on my teams. Excellent shooters. But this position requires something else. You need perfect. I need impossible. Morrison's voice dropped. Ghost. If the shot isn't there when my teams are in that courtyard, we lose people. Period. Al-Rashid's personal security detail includes former Spetsnaz operators and at least 2 trained snipers of their own. The moment my boys hit that compound, they're going to be in the crosshairs of people who know exactly what they're doing. Alex studied the terrain model, her mind automatically calculating range, angle, wind patterns, and a dozen other variables that would determine whether human beings lived or died. What are my restrictions? None. Full weapons release authority. Anyone who threatens my teams, you eliminate. No secondary approval required. Rules of engagement? You don't have any. Morrison's face was stone. You're not here. This mission will never reference a sniper on that ridge. Whatever happens tomorrow night, officially, it happened because of helicopter gunships and close-quarters combat. No one will ever know you were there. The familiar weight of anonymity settled over Alex like an old coat. She had worn it so long that she barely noticed anymore. When's the full mission brief? 1800. All operators, all support elements, full tactical rundown. Morrison hesitated. My men are going to be in that briefing. The ones who are outside. I assume so. They're good operators, Ghost. The best. But they've never worked with someone like you. They've never even seen someone like you. He chose his next words carefully. They're going to push back. Hard. Let them. I'm serious. Senior Chief Drake has been running point on this mission since we got the initial intel. He's going to see you as an outsider who's been parachuted in to take his Overwatch position. He's going to fight this. Alex picked up her rifle case and stood. Commander, I've been doing this job since before some of your operators finished high school. I've been doubted, dismissed, and underestimated by men who couldn't hit a barn from inside of it. None of that has ever affected my ability to do what I do. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Billeting is in the East Wing. Rack 3 in the female section. Not that there's much competition for space. Thank you, sir. One more thing. Morrison's voice stopped her at the door. The men who mock you outside. Senior Chief Drake, Petty Officer Chun, the others. They were in Raqqa 3 years ago. They were the team you saved when everything went sideways and extraction fell apart. His eyes met hers. They spent 3 years trying to find the sniper who kept them alive for 6 hours while they waited for help that almost didn't come. They bought drinks and bars for a ghost they've never seen, told stories about impossible shots that no one believed. Alex felt something shift in her chest. She hadn't known. The operations were classified separately, the connections deliberately obscured. She had saved dozens of teams over the years without ever knowing their names, without ever seeing their faces, except through a rifle scope. They don't know, she said. No, they just know that someone was up there. Someone kept shooting when they should have run. Someone killed 31 enemy fighters over 6 hours with 43 rounds. Morrison's voice was quiet now. They call that person the Angel. Alex was silent for a moment. Then, I'll be at the brief at 1800, sir. She left the TOC and walked through the FOB toward her assigned billeting, her mind processing the information Morrison had given her. The SEAL team outside, the one that had mocked her, that had assumed she was lost or incompetent, those were the men she had saved in Syria. Those were the men who owed their lives to 43 rounds fired across distances that should have been impossible, and they had no idea. The female billeting section was a small Quonset hut with 6 racks and a single occupant, a young Army intelligence analyst named Sarah, who glanced up from her laptop when Alex entered, then went back to her work without comment. Alex appreciated the lack of questions. She stowed her gear, secured her rifle case in the weapons locker, and stretched out on her rack with her hands behind her head. 8 hours until the brief. 8 hours until the men who didn't believe she belonged would learn exactly what she could do. Her phone buzzed. A secure message from JSOC confirming her authority codes for the mission. She scanned it, committed the relevant details to memory, then deleted the message. Another layer of deniability. Another erasure of her existence. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift back through the years, through the missions, through the faces she had seen only through glass at distances measured in hundreds of meters. 96 confirmed kills. She remembered each one, not with pride or satisfaction, but with the clinical detachment of someone who understood that death was simply a tool, and she was simply the hand that wielded it. The mess hall was crowded when Alex entered at 17:30, operators and support personnel filling the tables in cacophony of conversation and clattering trays. She collected her food, chicken, rice, vegetables that had clearly seen better days, and found a table in the corner where she could sit with her back to the wall and observe the room. Within 60 seconds, she spotted Senior Chief Drake and his team. They sat at a center table, the natural focal point of the room, their body language projecting the easy confidence of men who knew they were the apex predators in this environment. Drake was holding court, his booming voice carrying across the mess hall as he described what sounded like a previous operation with enthusiastic hand gestures. Alex ate quietly, watching. The team dynamics were immediately apparent. Drake was the leader, the dominant personality, the one whose approval everyone sought. Chun was the young gun, eager to prove himself, quick with jokes that kept the group's energy high. There were others, a massive operator with a shaved head who had to be the team's heavy weapons specialist, a wiry African-American man whose eyes never stopped moving, a stocky redhead who seemed to function as Drake's second-in-command. Good operators. She could see it in how they moved, how they positioned themselves, how they maintained awareness of the room, even while appearing to be fully engaged in conversation. Morrison was right. These were excellent warriors, but they had a blind spot. and that blind spot had blonde hair and was currently eating bad chicken in the corner of their mess hall. At 17:45, the conversation shifted. The redhead, whose name tag read Riley, said something to Drake that made the entire table turn to look in Alex's direction. She didn't react, didn't acknowledge their attention, just continued eating with the same measured pace she maintained since sitting down. Drake said something that made his team laugh. Then he stood up, carrying his tray, and began walking toward her table. Alex kept eating. "Hey," Drake said, stopping across from her. "Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the empty chairs. Drake sat, setting his tray down, his massive frame making the metal chair groan in protest. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the scar tissue on his knuckles, the 1,000-yard stare that softened into something like professional assessment as he studied her. "You're the sniper," he said. "I'm a sniper. The one Commander Morrison brought in special. The one who's taking Overwatch position Alpha." Alex set down her fork. "That's my assignment, yes." Drake leaned forward, his forearms on the table. "Look, I don't know what kind of pull you have at JSOC, and frankly, I don't care. But that position isn't a participation trophy. That position is the difference between my men coming home and my men coming home in bags. So I need you to be straight with me. About whether you can actually do this job." Alex met his eyes. There was no hostility in his voice now, just genuine concern. He wasn't challenging her because she was a woman. He was challenging her because he was responsible for keeping his teammates alive, and he had no evidence that she was capable of contributing to that mission. She could respect that. What would satisfy to that mission? She could respect that. "What would satisfy you?" she asked. "Your record, your qualifications, something that tells me you belong on that ridge. My record is classified. Then give me something that isn't." Alex considered her options. She could pull rank. A chief wore an Officer 5 outranked a senior chief, and she had authority directly from JSOC that superseded anything Drake could invoke. But that would create tension, resentment, the kind of fractures in operational unity that got people killed. Or she could show him. "The FOB has a range," she said. "Yeah, standard 500-meter configuration, but we've got some extended shooting positions that go out to about 800. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Drake's eyes narrowed. "You want to prove yourself on the range? I want to end this conversation so we can both focus on the mission." She stood, picking up her tray. 20 minutes, Senior Chief. Bring your team if you want. Bring anyone you want." She walked away without waiting for his response. 18 minutes later, Alex stood at the 1,000-meter range with her rifle case at her feet, watching as Drake and his entire team made their way toward her position. Word had apparently spread. There were at least 30 operators and support personnel following behind them, curious faces drawn by the promise of whatever was about to happen. The range officer, an Army sergeant named Patterson, approached her with confused expression. "Ma'am, the long-range physicians don't officially open until tomorrow. We got a brief in." "This won't take long, Sergeant." Alex opened her rifle case. The weapon inside drew immediate attention. It was a custom platform built on a Remington MSR chassis, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, with a Schmidt and Bender scope that cost more than most cars. The stock had been modified to her exact specifications. The trigger pull adjusted to an ounce weight that most shooters would consider dangerously light. It was, quite simply, the most precise long-range weapon ever built for human hands. "That's a nice rifle," Drake said, arriving at the firing line. "Custom job?" "Yes." "Looks expensive." It was. Drake gestured to the range. "So what's the plan here? You put a few rounds down range, and I'm supposed to be impressed?" Alex finished assembling her rifle, checked the chamber, and loaded a single round. 800 meters. You see the steel target at the back of the range. Drake squinted. "The small one? That's a 6-inch plate. I'm going to put 3 rounds through the same hole." Silence. Then Chin laughed. "Through the same hole? At 800 meters? Lady, that's not." "Watch." Alex settled into prone position, her movements fluid and practiced, her body finding the natural point of aim that came from thousands of hours of repetition. She slowed her breathing, felt her heartbeat pulse through her trigger finger, waited for the stillness between beats. The rifle cracked. Downrange, the steel plate rang with impact. Alex cycled the bolt, chambered another round, and fired again before the echo of the first shot had faded. Third round. She stood up, leaving the rifle on its bipod, and walked toward the spotting scope that Patterson had set up next to the firing line. She gestured for Drake to look. The senior chief stepped forward, pressed his eye to the scope, and was silent for a long moment. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "What do you see?" "One hole. One goddamn hole." He pulled back from the scope, his face pale. "That's not possible. Wind variability alone." "I read wind." "At 800 meters? With that precision?" "Yes." Drake looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. She could see the recalculation happening behind his eyes, the preconceptions crumbling, the new assessment taking shape. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. Alex picked up her rifle and began packing away. "I'm the person who's going to keep your team alive tomorrow night." The crowd that had gathered at the range stood in stunned silence. 30-plus operators, some of them the most experienced special warfare professionals in the American military, had just watched something that challenged their understanding of what was humanly possible. But Alex wasn't finished. "Sergeant Patterson," she said, not looking up from her rifle case, "what's the maximum effective range of your extended positions?" Patterson's voice cracked when he answered, "We've got a position that reaches out to about 1,250 meters, ma'am. But we don't use it much. The wind coming up through the valley makes precision work almost impossible." "Show me." Patterson led her to a secondary firing position 200 meters east of the main line. The terrain here opened up, revealing a long stretch of rocky ground that terminated in a series of distant targets barely visible to the naked eye. Alex studied the indicators. The way dust moved across the ground, the rustle of sparse vegetation, the heat shimmer that distorted the air. "Target at 1247 meters, Patterson confirmed, checking his range finder. 12-inch plate. "What rifle do you have available?" Patterson seemed caught off guard by the question. "We got a standard M110 in the armory. 7.62 NATO." "Get it." The gathered operators exchanged glances. The M110 was a capable platform, but it was a designated marksman rifle, not a purpose-built long-range precision weapon. Using it at 1,247 meters would be like using a sports car to compete in a Formula One race. Technically possible, but wildly inappropriate. Drake stepped forward. "Wait, you're not going to use your custom rig? You've seen what I can do with my rifle." Alex met his eyes. "Now I'm going to show you what I can do with yours." Patterson returned with the M110, and Alex took it from him with the casual familiarity of someone who had handled every weapon system in the American arsenal. She checked the chamber, examined the scope, dry-fired twice to feel the trigger. "This rifle pulls slightly left," she said. "The barrel has somewhere, probably about 4,000 rounds through it. The scope is set for a previous shooter, who holds differently than I do." "How can you know that from?" "Experience." She settled into position, her body finding its natural alignment with the unfamiliar weapon. The wind was treacherous here. She could feel it shifting, gusting, dying down, then returning with different intensity. The 12-inch plate at 1247 meters was barely visible, a tiny gray smudge against the rocky terrain. Alex closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she constructed a mental model of a shot. Range, angle, bullet weight, powder charge, twist rate of the barrel, temperature, altitude, humidity, wind speed, and direction at her position, at the midpoint, at the target. She ran the calculations not with conscious effort, but with the intuitive certainty of someone who had done this 10,000 times. She opened her eyes and fired. The steel rang. She adjusted, compensating for the rifle's leftward pull, for the scope's misalignment, for everything she had just learned about this particular weapon in the span of a single shot. Second shot. Third shot. Alex stood and stepped back from the rifle. 6-inch group. Patterson was already at the spotting scope. His voice came out strangled. 6.2 inches. All 3 rounds. He turned to look at her with something approaching reverence. "Ma'am, that's the best shooting I've ever seen. It's not bad for an unfamiliar rifle." "Not bad? Ma'am, I've seen Olympic shooters who couldn't." "Patterson." Alex's voice was quiet but firm. "Thank you for your assistance. I believe there's a mission brief starting in about 5 minutes that we all need to attend." The range officer snapped to attention without even realizing he was doing it. Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am. As the gathered operators began to move toward the Tosi, Alex felt Drake fall into step beside her. The senior chief walked in silence for a moment, then spoke without looking at her. Syria, he said, 2021, my team was pinned down in a village outside Raqqa. We'd been hit in an ambush, lost our vehicle, had 3 wounded who couldn't move. We spent 6 hours in a collapsed building while hostiles tried to overrun our position. Alex said nothing. During those 6 hours, someone on the high ground was covering us. Someone we never saw, never heard, never knew. All we knew was that every time hostiles tried to flank us, they died. Every time they massed for an assault, they died. 31 enemy fighters killed in 6 hours with 43 rounds. I've heard the story. We call that Sniper the Angel. Drake's voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. We've been trying to find them ever since. Bought drinks in every bar from San Diego to Virginia Beach, hoping someone would know something. None of us thought. He stopped walking. Alex stopped too. None of us thought it was a woman, Drake finished. She met his eyes. In them, she saw the transformation happening in real time, the preconception shattering, the respect rising from the rubble. This was the moment that always came, eventually, when people learned who she was. The moment when their assumptions collided with reality and reality won. You were brave in that building, Alex said quietly. You kept your team calm and organized. You protected your wounded. That's why you survived long enough for me to help. Drake blinked, and something shifted behind his eyes. It was you, he said. You're the angel. I'm a sniper, senior chief. I do a job. That job happened to put me on a ridge above your position that day. Nothing more. You saved 17 lives. And tomorrow night, I'm going to try to save more. Alex started walking again. Now let's get to the brief. We have work to do. The tactical operations center was packed by the time they arrived. Every operator assigned to the mission had gathered around the holographic display, along with the flight crews, the intelligence analysts, and the support personnel who would be coordinating the operation from the FOB. Commander Morrison stood at the head of the room, his face unreadable as he watched Alex and Drake enter together. He noticed a shift immediately, the way Drake's team had rearranged themselves, the way they looked at Alex now. Something had changed at the range, and Morrison clearly recognized it, even if he didn't yet know what had transpired. Take your seats, he announced. We begin in 2 minutes. Alex found a position along the wall, where she could see both the holographic display and every face in the room. Old habit. Know your exits, know your observers, know who's paying attention and who isn't. The brief began with intelligence updates on Al-Rashid's compound, forced disposition, defensive measures, known patterns of behavior. The target had approximately 40 fighters protecting him, including the former Spetsnaz operators Morrison had mentioned and 2 confirmed snipers who had established counter-overwatch positions on the surrounding ridges. Primary assault team will be Blue Element, led by Senior Chief Drake. Morrison said, highlighting approach routes on the display. Gold Element provides perimeter security. Green Element is a Ranger QRF, standing by at a rally point 2 clicks south. Air support is Red Flight, 2 Apache gunships with Hellfire and cannon. He zoomed in on the northern ridgeline. And this is Overwatch Position Alpha. The shooter at this location will have direct line of sight into the compound's central courtyard and cover over every approach route within 400 meters of the objective. Morrison's eyes found Alex. Chief Warrant Officer Reyes will occupy this position. Murmurs ran through the room. Most of the operators hadn't been at the range. They didn't know what had happened, didn't know who she was. Commander, one of them said, a Ranger captain whose name tape read Jensen. That position is critical. We're putting A. He trailed off, apparently recognizing the minefield he was about to step into. A what, Captain? Morrison's voice was ice. I just mean that's a 1,400-meter shot. In adverse conditions. At night, you need the best long-range precision shooter available. Morrison interrupted. And you're looking at her. The room went silent. Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexander Reyes, Morrison continued, has 96 confirmed kills across 7 theaters of operation. Her longest confirmed shot is 2,340 meters, which remains a classified record. She holds 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 3 silver stars, and a combat action badge with more engagement stars than most of you at deployments. The silence deepened. She is also known in certain classified circles as the Angel Sniper. Drake's team reacted visibly, straightening in their seats, exchanging wide-eyed glances. Several of them turned to look at Alex with expressions of dawning recognition. For those of you who don't know that call sign, Morrison said, let me be clear. 3 years ago, in Syria, Chief Warrant Officer Reyes held a ridge above a SEAL team for 6 hours, eliminating 31 enemy combatants with 43 rounds, while outnumbered and cut off from support. She is, statistically, the most lethal sniper in the history of American special operations. Morrison let that sink in. Questions about her assignment? No one spoke. Good. Let's continue. The brief continued for another 90 minutes, covering every detail of the operation. Timing windows, communication protocols, contingency plans, medevac procedures. Alex absorbed it all, her mind cataloging the information and cross-referencing it against her own tactical assessments. By the time Morrison called for final questions, she had identified 3 potential weaknesses in the plan and formulated solutions for each. Chief Warrant Officer Reyes, Morrison said as the brief concluded, stay behind. Everyone else get some rest. We step off at 0130. The room emptied slowly, operators filing out in small groups, many of them casting glances at Alex as they passed. The dynamic had shifted completely from the morning's mockery. They knew who she was now. They knew what she could do. The knowledge sat heavy in the room like the aftermath of thunder. When the last operator had left, Morrison sealed the door and turned to face her. I need to know your assessment, he said. Alex stepped toward the holographic display, manipulating controls to zoom in on her assigned position. The overwatch point is solid. Good concealment, excellent sight lines, adequate cover from return fire. I can make the shots. But the approach route is compromised. She highlighted a section of terrain. You've got me moving up this ridge under cover of darkness, which is fine, but there's a 200-meter section here where I'll be silhouetted against the sky from the enemy's eastern sniper position. If they're using thermal, they'll see me. Morrison studied the terrain. Options: delay my insertion. Have me move to position after Blue Element initiates contact, when the enemy's attention is focused on the assault team. That puts you out of position during the initial breach for approximately 4 minutes. Your assault teams are experienced enough to survive for minutes without overwatch. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Whether they're not, then we accept the risk of the original timeline, and I move carefully. Alex's voice was matter-of-fact. I've avoided detection in worse conditions. I know you have. Morrison rubbed his eyes. What else? The Spetsnaz advisors concern me, not because of what they'll do. I can anticipate most Russian-trained tactics, but because of what they know. If Al-Rashid has genuine former special operations assets in a security detail, they'll be looking for exactly what we're planning. They'll expect a sniper. Can you beat them? Alex considered the question with the same clinical detachment she brought to every tactical assessment. In a straight engagement, one-on-one, yes. But I won't be in a straight engagement. I'll be trying to provide overwatch for your teams while defending my own position against trained counter-snipers. That's a much more complicated equation. Can you do it? I've done it before. Morrison nodded slowly. Is there anything you need? Equipment support anything? A spotter would help. I can give you Chun. He's young, but he's got good eyes. Alex shook her head. Chun is too valuable in the assault stack. Don't pull him for me. She paused. I'll manage alone. I usually do. Morrison studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. A softening, perhaps, or maybe just fatigue. Ghost, I want you to know that I didn't ask for you specifically because of what you can do. I asked for you because of who you are. I'm not sure there's a difference, sir. There is. Morrison moved to a small refrigerator in the corner of the room and pulled out 2 bottles of water. He handed one to Alex. I've commanded a lot of shooters over the years. Good ones. Great ones. Men who could put rounds on target from distances that shouldn't be possible. But you're different. How so? You understand what the rifle means. Morrison opened his water and took a long drink. Most snipers, they see themselves as specialists. Technicians. They calculate windage and elevation, and they squeeze triggers and they watch people fall down, and they think they've done their job. But you, he shook his head, you understand that every trigger pull is a choice. Every shot is a moral decision. Every life you take is a weight you carry. Alex was silent. That's why I wanted you on this mission. Not because you're the best shooter, although you are, but because you understand the difference between killing, because you can, and killing because you must. Morrison's eyes met hers. Tomorrow night, my men are going to be counting on you to make those decisions in fractions of a second. I need someone who will make them right. I will, sir. I know. Morrison set down his water. Get some rest. You got about 5 hours before we step off. Alex retrieved her rifle case and headed for the door. As she reached it, Morrison's voice stopped her one more time. Ghost! She turned. The men who laughed at you this morning. Drake's team. Morrison's face was unreadable. They're the best I've ever commanded. They're also the most arrogant. They've been humbled twice today, once at the range and once in that brief. That's good. They needed it. He paused. But don't let their past behavior affect how you protect them tomorrow. They're still my men. They're still Americans. Alex's voice was quiet when she answered. Commander, I've spent 15 years protecting people who would never know my name, never see my face, never understand that I was there. I've saved lives that will never say thank you, and ended lives that will never get justice. None of that has ever affected my ability to do the job. She opened the door. I'll protect your men, sir. Same as I've always protected every man I've served with, because that's what I do. The door closed behind her. 4.5 hours later, Alex lay in her rack, staring at the ceiling of the female billeting quarters. Sarah, the intelligence analyst, had long since gone to sleep, her breathing steady and slow. The FOB was quiet, that particular stillness that settled over military installations in the hours before major operations, as if the buildings themselves were holding their breath. Alex ran through the mission in her mind one more time. Infiltration route, position establishment, fields of fire, threat prioritization. Contingency plans for the enemy spotted her, if the comms went down, if the assault teams got pinned, if everything went sideways simultaneously. She had done this 100 times, 1,000 times. Each mission the same ritual of preparation, the same mental discipline, the same acceptance of what was to come. Tomorrow night, she would kill people. She didn't know how many. She didn't know their names. She didn't know if they had families, hopes, dreams. She knew only that they had chosen to stand between American forces and a man responsible for the deaths of hundreds of innocent people, and that choice had consequences. The rifle didn't care about context. The rifle only knew physics. But Alex cared. She always cared. That was what made her good. At 0100, her alarm vibrated silently against her wrist. She rose, dressed in the darkness, and gathered her gear with the efficiency of long practice. Sarah stirred but didn't wake. Alex slipped out of quarters and into the Afghan night. The air was cold, carrying the mineral smell of the mountains and the faint chemical tang of aviation fuel. Stars blazed overhead in the darkness, undimmed by light pollution. In the distance, she could hear helicopters spinning up, the whine of turbines, the rhythmic thump of rotors beginning their slow rotation toward flight speed. Alex made her way to the staging area, where Drake's team was already assembled. They stood in a loose formation, checking equipment, speaking in low voices. The laughter and mockery of the morning might have happened in another lifetime. Now they were all business, focused, professional, deadly. Drake saw her approach and broke away from his team. Chief Warrant Officer, he said, and there was nothing but respect in his voice now. We're ready to step off on your signal. Not my operation, Senior Chief. Commander Morrison runs the show. Maybe. Drake's eyes met hers in the darkness. But you're the one who's going to keep us alive up there. The helicopter ride to the insertion point took 47 minutes. Alex sat in the doorway of the Black Hawk, her rifle case secure between her knees, watching the Afghan landscape scroll past beneath the rotors. Mountains rose in jagged silhouettes against the stars, their peaks dusted with the remnants of winter snow. The valleys below were pools of absolute darkness. No electric lights, no signs of human habitation, just the ancient emptiness of terrain that had swallowed armies for 3,000 years. Blue Element was on her bird. Drake sat across from her, his face partially obscured by night vision goggles pushed up onto his helmet. His team occupied the other seats. Chun Riley, the big weapons specialist whose name she learned was Torres, the wiry African-American who went by Shadow. Good men. Men who had trusted her with their lives once before, even if they hadn't known it. At 0245, the pilot's voice crackled in Alex's earpiece. 30 seconds to insertion. Ghost, your drop point is 200 meters east of the primary LZ. You'll be on your own from there. Understood. The helicopter flared and touched down on a rocky ledge that barely accommodated its landing gear. Alex was out the door before the wheels had fully settled, her boots finding purchase on a loose stone, her rifle case banging against her back. The Black Hawk lifted immediately, banking hard toward the primary landing zone, where Drake's team would begin their approach to the target compound. Silence settled over the mountain. Alex stood motionless for 30 seconds, letting her eyes adjust, listening for any indication that her insertion had been observed. The night was still. Wind whispered through the rocks. Somewhere in the distance, a wild dog barked and was answered by others. She moved. The climb to her Overwatch position took 90 minutes, longer than the mission timeline allowed. But Alex refused to rush. Speed created noise. Noise created detection. Detection created failure. So she moved like a shadow, flowing over the rocky terrain with a patience that bordered on supernatural. Twice, she froze. Once when a loose stone shifted beneath her boot, once when the moonlight caught her at a bad angle. Both times, she waited motionless for minutes, ensuring that any observer would have dismissed a movement as natural. Then she continued. At 0415, she reached her position. The ridgeline was everything the reconnaissance photos had promised. Excellent concealment, clear sight lines into the compound, natural shooting positions carved by erosion and time. Alex settled into a depression between two boulders, arranged her equipment, and assembled her rifle with the quiet efficiency of a musician preparing their instrument. Through her scope, the compound resolved into crisp detail. She could see the guard towers, the defensive walls, the central courtyard where Al-Rashid would hopefully meet his end. She could see the sentries walking their posts with the bored complacency of men who had done this 1,000 nights and never seen trouble. That was about to change. Overwatch Alpha in position, Alex murmured into her comm unit. Eyes on target. Condition green. Morrison's voice crackled back. Copy, Alpha. Blue element is 20 minutes from breach. Hold position and await weapons release. Roger. Holding. 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, the compound would erupt into violence, and Alex's finger would begin its deadly work. Until then, she waited, watching, cataloging every movement in the kill zone below. She spotted the enemy sniper at minute 7. He was on the eastern ridge, exactly where the intelligence suggested he would be, tucked into a position that mirrored her own. Through her scope, she could see the faint heat signature of his body, the silhouette of his rifle, the methodical way he scanned the terrain. He was good. She could tell by his discipline, by his patience, by the way he moved his scope rather than his head. But he wasn't looking in her direction. Not yet. Alex made a mental note of his position, calculated the shot she would need to take if he became a threat, and continued her surveillance. The second sniper was harder to find. His position on the western ridge was better concealed, and it took her another 3 minutes to locate him. This one was less disciplined, shifting frequently, probably uncomfortable in his hide. 2 counter-snipers, 40-plus fighters. 2 teams of elite special operators about to hit the compound with everything they had. The math wasn't good, but Alex hadn't built her reputation on good math. She had built it on doing the impossible, night after night, shot after shot, in conditions that should have made precision shooting a fantasy. At 0435, Morrison's voice came through the comm blue element in position. Gold element set. Red flight standing by. All elements. Weapons release in 3, 2, 1 execute. The compound exploded into violence. Simultaneous breaches at 2 entry points. Flashbang grenades detonating with their distinctive thundercrack. The staccato bursts of suppressed rifles. Shouts in Arabic. Screams of surprise. The chaos of a perfectly coordinated assault. Alex's world narrowed to her scope. First target. A fighter stumbling out of a side building, raising an AK-47 toward Drake's advancing team. Squeeze. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Downrange, the fighter dropped. Second target. Another hostile. This one more alert, sprinting toward a machine gun position that would give him a field of fire into the courtyard. Squeeze. He collapsed 3 feet short of his goal. Third, fourth, fifth targets. Each one a threat identified, tracked, and eliminated in the span of a heartbeat. Alex worked the bolt of her rifle with mechanical precision, chambering fresh rounds, finding new targets, sending death across 1,400 meters of Afghan night. Alpha, you're clear on my 12. Drake's voice came through, slightly breathless. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. She didn't answer. There wasn't time. The Eastern sniper had finally spotted her muzzle flash. She saw him swinging his rifle, seeking, searching. She adjusted her aim in a fraction of a second and fired. The distant figure went still. 7 kills in 90 seconds. Alex's hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her heart rate barely elevated. This was what she did. This was what she had always done. On the compound floor, Blue Element was pushing deeper, clearing rooms, stacking bodies. Gold Element had established their perimeter and was engaging fighters attempting to flee. Red Flight's Apaches circled overhead, their guns silent for now. There wasn't a clear target they could hit without risk of friendly fire. Then everything went wrong. The explosion came from the compound's eastern wing. Not the controlled detonation of a breaching charge, but something bigger, something that shook the ground even from Alex's position a kilometer away. A plume of fire erupted into the night sky, illuminating the compound in hellish orange light. Blue Element, report. Morrison's voice was sharp. What the hell was that? Static. Then Drake's voice, strained but controlled. We hit a trap. The eastern wing was rigged to blow. We got 2 men down, possibly more hostiles than we anticipated. The transmission cut off as automatic weapons, fire drowned out everything else. Alex scanned frantically. Through her scope, she could see Blue Element pinned behind a low wall in the courtyard, taking fire from at least 3 directions. The cleared buildings had apparently not been cleared at all. Fighters were emerging from concealed positions, basements, hidden rooms. The ambush had been perfectly executed. Gold Element moved to support Blue, danger close fire on grid. Negative. That was Riley's voice. They're too close. You'll hit us. Alex made her decision. She shifted her aim, tracking past the immediate firefight to the source of the heaviest fire, a fortified position on the compound's second floor, where at least 4 fighters had established a devastating crossfire. Her scope found the shooter in the window, the one directing the others, the one whose elimination would break the ambush's coordination. 1,400 meters. Downward angle. Wind gusting from the northeast. Target partially obscured by window frame and moving. Impossible shot. She took it. The rifle cracked. The bullet flew true. The shooter in the window dropped. The fighters around him hesitated. Just for a moment, just long enough, and in that moment, Drake's team moved. They surged from cover, pouring fire into the confused enemy positions, breaking the ambush through pure aggression and violence of action. Alex returned to her grim work. Each shot was a calculation, a decision, a life ended. She didn't think about the men behind the targets, the fathers and sons, the brothers and friends. She thought only about the Americans in danger, the lives she was saving with each trigger pull. 13 kills. 15. 17. The compound was falling quiet now. The surviving fighters were either dead, surrendered, or fleeing into the mountains. Gold Element had linked up with Blue Element and was conducting systematic room clearances. Red Flight made a low pass, their searchlights cutting through the smoke and dust. All elements, compound secure, Morrison announced. Begin sensitive site exploitation. Medical we need. Commander. Drake's voice cut through. We found him. Al-Rashid. He's dead. Silence on the net. Say again, Blue Leader. Target is confirmed Kia. Looks like he took one in the head during the initial breach. Drake paused. Commander, it was a perfect shot. 1,400 meters. Through a window. Moving target. We don't have anyone who could have made that shot. Morrison's response was quiet. We do, Senior Chief. We definitely do. The flight back to FOB Rhino was silent, except for the rhythmic thunder of the rotors. Alex sat in the same doorway position she'd occupied on the way out, her rifle case secure between her knees, watching the first hints of dawn paint the eastern horizon in shades of rose and gold. 17 confirmed kills. She had kept count automatically, the way she always did, her mind cataloging each shot, each target, each life ended. 17 men who had woken up yesterday with no idea that this would be their last sunrise. 17 men whose choices had led them to that compound, to that moment, to the intersection of their lives and her crosshairs. She didn't feel triumph. She never did. She felt tired. The compound was burning now, visible as a flickering orange glow in the valley below. The sensitive site exploitation had yielded intelligence that Morrison was still processing, documents, computers, communications equipment that would take weeks to fully analyze. Al-Rashid's network would be compromised, his operations disrupted, his followers scattered, and 37 Americans were going home alive. That number mattered more than the 17 she had killed. That was the math Alex had learned to live with, the arithmetic of war, where the equation was never clean, and the variables were measured in human lives. Across the helicopter, Drake sat with his head bowed, his hands clasped between his knees. He had lost no one tonight. Miraculous, given how badly the ambush had caught them, but the close call had clearly shaken him. Jim was beside him, the young operator unusually quiet, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. When the helicopter touched down at Rhino, the sun was just cresting the horizon. Alex descended the ramp into golden light that made the Afghan dust glow like powdered copper. She began walking toward the armory to secure her weapon, then stopped. The FOB's main avenue was lined with personnel, not just the operators from the mission. Everyone, cooks and clerks, medics and mechanics, intelligence analysts and communication specialists. They stood in two facing rows, creating a corridor that led from the landing zone to the tactical operations center. Every one of them was standing at attention. Commander Morrison stood at the end of the corridor, his silver-streaked hair catching the morning light. Alex felt something shift in her chest. She looked at Drake, who had stepped up beside her, and saw that he was already raising his hand in salute. "Chief Warrant Officer Rays," Drake said, his voice carrying across the silent formation. "On behalf of Blue Element, Gold Element, and every man who came home tonight because of what you did," his voice cracked slightly. "Thank you." She didn't know what to say. For 15 years, she had operated in shadows, her achievements credited to phantom units and classified operations. She had never stood in the sunlight like this. She had never been seen. "I was doing my job, Senior Chief." "No, ma'am." That was Chun, who had somehow appeared on her other side. "What you did last night, that wasn't a job. That was something else." He raised his own hand in salute. "We owe you everything." One by one, down the line, hands rose. Every operator, every support staffer, every person on that FOB lifted their arm in salute. The morning sun glinted off their faces, caught the tears on some of them, illuminated a profound respect in all of them. Alex felt a lump forming in her throat. She forced it down. "I'm just a sniper," she said quietly. "Ma'am, with respect," Drake replied, "you're a lot more than that." Commander Morrison began walking toward her. His stride was measured, deliberate, his dress uniform immaculate despite the long night of coordinating operations from the TOC. When he reached her, he stopped at arm's length and executed a salute so crisp it could have been carved from marble. "Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexander Rays," he said, his voice pitched to carry across the silent formation. "On behalf of Joint Special Operations Command, I extend the formal gratitude of the United States of America for your actions during Operation Righteous Thunder." Alex returned the salute. Her arm felt heavy. 37 Americans are alive this morning. Because of you, a high-value target responsible for hundreds of innocent deaths has been eliminated. And the men standing before you, men who admittedly question your presence and your capabilities, have learned a lesson they will carry for the rest of their careers. Morrison lowered his hand. Alex lowered hers. "They've learned," Morrison continued, "that courage doesn't have a gender, that skill doesn't care about prejudice, that the most dangerous warrior in any engagement might be the one you never expected." He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and extended his hand. Alex took it. "Welcome to the light, Ghost," Morrison said quietly, for her ears alone. "You've earned it." Behind her, the formation began to break. Operators surged forward. surrounding her, extending hands in gratitude in the rough camaraderie of warriors who had shared something profound. Drake was there, and Chun and Torres and Shadow, and a dozen others whose names she didn't know, but whose lives she had protected. "Drinks are on us," Drake announced, his voice booming. "As soon as we get somewhere that actually has drinks." "I don't drink on mission," Alex said. "Ma'am, the mission is over. You just put 17 hostiles in the ground from 1,400 meters in the middle of a firefight. If anyone has earned a drink, it's you." Alex felt the ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. It was an unfamiliar sensation. She couldn't remember the last time she had smiled after an operation. Usually she simply processed, compartmentalized, and prepared for the next mission. There was never time for anything else. But this felt different. This felt like something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. Recognition. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning chill, illuminating the faces of the men and women who had gathered to honor her. Alex stood among them, accepting their gratitude with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything, and allowed herself a moment, just a moment, to feel what it meant to be seen. Then she straightened her shoulders and looked at Drake. "Debrief first," she said. "Drinks after." "Yes, ma'am." Drake grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. The debrief lasted 4 hours. Every moment of the operation was reviewed, analyzed, documented. Alex sat at the conference table with Morrison, Drake, and the other team leaders, walking through each engagement, each decision, each shot. Her 17 kills were mapped onto the compound layout, a constellation of violence that had shaped the battle's outcome. "The ambush in the eastern wing," Morrison said, pointing to the holographic display. "Intel failure. We had no indication the building was rigged. It happened, sir." Drake's voice was tired but not bitter. "We adapt, we overcome, we come home. You came home because of Overwatch." Morrison looked at Alex. "The shot that broke the ambush. The one through the second floor window. Our tactical analysts say the probability of making that shot under those conditions was approximately 4%. With respect, sir, probability doesn't account for experience." "Clearly not." Morrison made a note. "We're documenting this operation for after-action review at the joint level. Your contributions will be classified as usual, but the lessons learned will inform future mission planning." Alex nodded. "The same as always." Her work would vanish into classified files. Her name would be removed from reports. Her existence would continue to be a secret known only to a handful of senior commanders. The men she had saved tonight would tell stories about the Angel Sniper, but they would never be able to prove she was real. That was the life she had chosen. Or rather, the life that had been chosen for her. 15 years ago, a young Army markswoman had demonstrated abilities that exceeded anything the military had seen. She had been recruited by an organization that didn't officially exist, trained by instructors who would deny ever meeting her, and deployed to theaters where her presence could never be acknowledged. The reasons were political. A female sniper operating at the highest levels of special operations would have been a controversy, a target, a liability. So she had been erased. Ghost. The name fit better than anyone knew. When the debrief concluded, Alex gathered her materials and headed for the door. She was stopped by a touch on her arm. Drake, his expression serious. "Chief Warrant Officer." A word. She followed him to a quiet corner of the TOC. The senior chief seemed to struggle for a moment, his usual confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. Yesterday morning, I guess, when you arrived, the things we said, the way we treated you." He shook his head. "It was unprofessional. It was wrong. And it was exactly the kind of attitude that's gotten good people killed in the past." "Senior Chief, let me finish." Drake's voice was firm. "I've been in this business 18 years. I've worked with the best operators on the planet. And I have never seen anyone do what you did last night. The shooting was impossible. The decision-making was perfect. The way you controlled that engagement from 1,400 meters while we were getting our asses kicked." He trailed off, shaking his head again. "You're the real deal. The most real deal I've ever encountered. And I couldn't see it because I'm a woman." "Yeah." Drake's jaw tightened. "Because you're a woman. And I'm sorry." Alex studied his face. She saw genuine remorse there. and something else, a fundamental shift in understanding that would change how he approached every female service member for the rest of his career, that perhaps was more valuable than any apology. Apology accepted, Senior Chief. Just like that. Just like that. Alex allowed herself a small smile. I've spent 15 years proving myself to men who didn't believe I could do this job. If I held a grudge against every one of them, I wouldn't have time for anything else. Drake laughed, a genuine laugh, surprised out of him. Fair enough. He extended his hand. It's been an honor serving with you, Chief Warrant Officer. If you ever need anything at all, Drake and his team are there. No questions asked. Alex shook his hand. I appreciate that. Now go get some sleep. You look like hell. Copy that, ma'am. She watched him go, then made her own way toward billeting. The FOB was settling into the rhythm of a post-operation day, the heightened tension draining away, replaced by the fatigue of men and women who had given everything they had. In another 12 hours, a new mission cycle would begin, and the events of last night would fade into memory. But for now, there was rest. Alex's rack waited for her in the quiet of the female billeting quarters. Sarah had apparently been told something about the night's events. She looked up from her laptop with wide eyes when Alex entered, then quickly looked away, as if afraid of intruding. It's fine, Alex said, sitting on the edge of her rack. You can ask. I wasn't going to. Sarah stopped herself. Okay, I was, but I didn't want to be weird about it. Ask, is it true that you're the Angel Sniper? That you've been doing this for 15 years without anyone knowing? Alex began unlacing her boots. What did you hear? That you save an entire SEAL team single-handedly. That you got more kills than any sniper in American history. That you, Sarah's voice dropped, that you're the reason 37 people are going home to their families. That part's true. All of it's true, isn't it? Alex looked at the young analyst. Sarah couldn't be more than 25. Too young to understand the weight of secrets. Too innocent to comprehend the cost of being invisible. But she was bright and curious, and she had asked the question directly. Yes, Alex said. All of it's true. Sarah was silent for a moment. Then, why didn't anyone know? Why wasn't there... shouldn't there be medals and recognition and... There are. Alex lay back on her rack, staring at the ceiling. 2 Distinguished Service Crosses. 3 Silver Stars. A combat action badge with more stars than I can count. They're all locked in a classified file at JSOC, waiting for the day when someone decides it's safe for the world to know I exist. That's not fair. No, it isn't. Alex closed her eyes. But fair was never the point. The point was the mission. The point was saving lives. The point was doing the job that needed to be done, regardless of whether anyone would ever know who did it. Do you ever regret it? Alex considered the question. Did she regret 15 years of anonymity? 15 years of watching other snipers receive the credit for her kills? 15 years of being a ghost in a world that couldn't acknowledge her existence? Sometimes, she admitted. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to have a normal career. To see my name on a promotion list. To walk into a bar and have someone recognize me for what I've done. She paused. But then I remember the faces of the people I've saved. The SEALs in Syria. The Rangers in Afghanistan. The special operators who are alive because I was on a ridge somewhere doing what I do. And that's enough? It has to be. Alex's voice was quiet. Because if it isn't enough, then everything I've sacrificed was for nothing. And I can't accept that. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, you're a hero. I'm a sniper. Alex's eyes remained closed. The rifle doesn't care about heroes. It only cares about the target. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by the faces of the men she had killed. Alex had long ago learned to accept the dreams, the price of her profession, the toll extracted by a conscience that refused to become completely numb. She dreamed of the fighter in the window, the one whose elimination had broken the ambush. In the dream, he turned to face her before she pulled the trigger, and his face was that of someone she had known once, long ago. She woke at sunset, her body stiff in the uncomfortable rack, her mind foggy with particular exhaustion that followed extended operations. Sarah was gone. Her shift at the intelligence center, probably. The corridors were silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning unit. Alex rose, stretched, and began the slow process of returning to functionality. A shower in the communal facilities, hot water, sluicing away the grime and sweat of the past 24 hours, clean clothes from her pack, a meal in the mess hall, where conversations fell silent as she entered and resumed in hushed tones after she passed. She had been seen now. The secret was out, at least within this FOB. The angel sniper had a face, a name, a gender that no one had expected. She could feel the weight of their attention, some admiring, some curious, some still unable to reconcile what they had believed with what they now knew. After eating, she made her way to the communications center and sent a secure message to JSOC confirming the operation's success and her status. The reply came within minutes. A new assignment, a new extraction timeline, a new theater where her skills would be required. The machine never stopped. The war never ended. She was reading the details when Drake found her. "Thought you might be here," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. He looked better, still tired, but recovered enough to function. "Morrison's looking for you. Something about a ceremony." A ceremony? Apparently word of last night's op reached the brass faster than usual. Some general is flying in tomorrow to... Drake made a complicated gesture. To do general things. "Morrison wants you front and center." Alex's expression didn't change, but something tightened in her chest. "That's not how this works. I'm not supposed to be visible. Maybe that's changing." "It can't change. My entire career is predicated on not existing. If I start appearing at ceremonies, showing my face." "Ghost." Drake's voice was gentle. "Maybe it's time." She stared at him. "Time for what?" "Time to stop being a ghost." Drake leaned forward. "Look, I don't know the full scope of what you've done or why you've been hidden. That's above my pay grade. But what I do know is that I watched a woman walk into this FOB yesterday and get treated like she didn't belong. And then I watched that same woman save 37 lives with nothing but a rifle and more skill than I've ever seen in my entire career." He paused. "Maybe it's time for people to know that women like you exist. Maybe it's time for little girls who want to serve their country to have someone to look up to." Alex was silent for a long moment. The words resonated in ways she hadn't expected, touched something deep that she had buried years ago, back when she first understood what her career would require. "I'll talk to Morrison," she said finally. The conversation with the commander took place in his private office, with the door sealed and the room swept for listening devices. Morrison sat behind his desk, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. "JSOC is reconsidering your classification status," he said without preamble. "The events of last night have generated significant interest at the highest levels. There are people who think it's time to acknowledge your contributions publicly, and there are people who think that's a terrible idea." "Yes, there are." Morrison leaned back. "The arguments against are familiar. Security concerns, political backlash, potential targeting by enemy forces who would love to score a propaganda victory against a high-profile female operator. Those arguments haven't changed in 15 years. No, but what has changed is the operational environment. Women are serving in combat roles across all branches now. The taboo that necessitated your concealment is fading." Morrison paused. "And frankly, Ghost, what you did last night is going to leak. Too many people saw the ceremony this morning. Too many people know your name now. We can either control the narrative or let it control us." Alex considered this. The thought of exposure, of her face appearing in news reports, her name becoming public knowledge, her achievements becoming fodder for political debates, was deeply unsettling. She had built her identity around invisibility. Without the shadows, who would she be? "What are you recommending, sir?" "I'm recommending that we begin the process of transitioning you to acknowledged status. It would be gradual. Initial recognition within the special operations community, eventual integration into public-facing roles, if you're willing." Morrison's eyes met hers. "You've served in darkness for 15 years, Ghost. Maybe it's time to step into the light. And if I refuse, then nothing changes. You remain classified. You continue operating as you have, and you eventually retire without anyone outside a very small circle ever knowing what you did." Morrison's voice softened. "But I think that would be a waste. Not just for you, but for everyone who could benefit from knowing that warriors like you exist." Alex stood and walked a window. Outside, the FOB continued its rhythms. Vehicles moving, personnel walking, the endless machinery of war grinding forward. Somewhere out there, a helicopter was lifting off, carrying operators to another mission, another engagement, another round in an endless cycle of violence. She had been part of that cycle for so long that she couldn't imagine anything else. But maybe that was the problem. "There's a general coming tomorrow," she said. "Brigadier General Patricia Hayes." Morrison confirmed. "Deputy Commander of JSOC. She's been one of your strongest advocates within the command structure. She wants to meet you personally. A woman who broke her own barriers, yes. She knows what you faced. She knows what it's cost." Morrison rose and stood beside her. "Ghost, I can't make this decision for you. But I can tell you that the men who served with you last night will remember this mission for the rest of their lives. They'll tell stories about the angel sniper who saved them, and those stories will spread whether you want them to or not." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've already stepped into the light. The only question is whether you're going to stay there." The night passed in contemplation. Alex sat on the roof of the billeting quarters, watching stars wheel across the Afghan sky, wrestling with a decision that felt larger than any she had faced in combat. In combat, the choices were simple. Target or no target. Shoot or don't shoot. Live or die. The variables were complex, but the fundamental equation was binary. Here, in this quiet space between operations, the equation had no clear solution. For 15 years, she had been a ghost. The anonymity had protected her, yes, but it had also defined her. Without the shadows, without the secrecy, she would have to discover who Alexandra Reyes actually was. Not ghost, not angel, just a woman who had given everything to her country and received nothing in return. Was that what she wanted? Recognition that came with scrutiny? Fame that came with vulnerability? Or was she simply afraid of being ordinary? The sun rose eventually, as it always did. Alex descended from the roof and prepared herself for what was coming. Dress uniform. The one she carried but rarely wore. The uniform that bore none of the decorations she had earned. Her rifle case, cleaned and secured. Her face, composed into the neutral mask she had perfected over years of remaining invisible. The ceremony was scheduled for 0900 in the FOB's main assembly area. When Alex arrived, she found formation already in place. Blue Element, Gold Element, the Ranger QRF, the Apache crews, the support personnel, everyone who had contributed to Operation Righteous Thunder. They stood in precise ranks, their uniforms immaculate, their faces serious. And at the head of the formation, Brigadier General Patricia Hayes waited. Hayes was a compact woman in her mid-50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a regulation bun, her uniform bearing the accumulated weight of 30 years of distinguished service. She was one of the first women to command Special Operations Forces, a pioneer who had faced every obstacle Alex had faced and more. She watched Alex approach with eyes that missed nothing. "Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexandra Reyes," Hayes said, her voice carrying across the silent formation. Step forward. Alex walked to the center of the assembly area and came to attention. Behind her, she could feel the eyes of every person present, the men she had saved, the men she had humbled, the men whose assumptions she had shattered. "At ease, Chief Warrant Officer." Hayes' voice softened slightly. "Look around you." Alex turned. The formation stretched before her, faces she recognized and faces she didn't, united by the shared experience of the mission. Drake stood at the front of Blue Element, his expression one of fierce pride. Chin was beside him, and Torres and Shadow and Riley, the operators she had mocked, then awed, then saved. "These men and women are here because of you," Hayes continued. 37 Americans who will return to their families, continue their service, live their lives, because of shots you took from 1,400 meters away, in conditions that should have made precision shooting impossible. Hayes stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "For 15 years, you have served in shadows. Your achievements have been classified, your contributions hidden, your sacrifices unacknowledged. This was done to protect you and to preserve operational security in an environment that was not ready for warriors like you." She paused. "That environment has changed, and it is time for the world to know what you have done." From somewhere behind her, an aide stepped forward carrying a small velvet case. Hayes took it and opened it, revealing a medal that gleamed in the morning sun. By order of the President of the United States, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexander Reyes is hereby awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat during Operation Righteous Thunder. This award is presented in recognition of actions that resulted in the successful elimination of a high-value target and the preservation of 37 American lives. Hayes lifted the medal and stepped forward. This is the third Distinguished Service Cross you have earned, Chief Warrant Officer. The first two remain classified, known only to a handful of senior officers. But this one, she pinned the medal to Alex's chest. This one is public. This one the world will know. Alex felt the weight of the medal, not just a physical weight, but the symbolic weight of everything it represented. 15 years of service, 96 confirmed kills, countless operations in places whose names she wasn't allowed to speak. All of it crystallized into a small piece of metal on a ribbon of red, white, and blue. You are no longer a ghost, Hayes said quietly, for Alex's ears alone. You are a hero, and heroes deserve to be seen. She stepped back and raised her hand in salute. Around the formation, every arm rose in unison. The morning sun caught the movement, turning it into a wave of respect that washed over Alex like a physical force. She stood amid the salutes, feeling something break loose inside her. 15 years of isolation, of anonymity, of being invisible in a profession built on visibility. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexander Reyes allowed herself to feel proud. And then she returned the salute. The ceremony concluded with handshakes and photographs. Another first for Alex, who had spent her career avoiding cameras with the same dedication she applied to avoiding enemy fire. Hayes remained afterward, dismissing her aide and walking with Alex toward the edge of the FOB where the mountains rose in ancient majesty. I was like you once, Hayes said, her eyes on the distant peaks. Different specialty, different era, but the same fundamental experience. Being the only woman in rooms full of men who didn't think I belonged. With respect, General, you were never invisible. No, but I was isolated, which is its own kind of invisibility. Hayes turned to face her. I've followed your career since the beginning, you know. Classified reports, mission summaries, the quiet whispers that circulate among those of us who know about programs like yours. Every shot, every kill, every impossible success. I've seen it all. Then you know why I stayed hidden. I know why you were hidden. What I don't know is why you agreed to it. The question caught Alex off guard. She had never considered it in those terms. There had been no choice, no agency. She had been told that her career would be classified, that her existence would be denied, and she had accepted it because that was what the mission required. But had she accepted it, or had she simply never questioned it? The mission, she said finally, everything was about the mission. That's the answer of someone who's never allowed herself to think about what she wanted. Hayes's voice was gentle but firm. Alex, may I call you Alex? You spent 15 years subordinating everything to the rifle. Your identity, your relationships, your sense of self. You become exactly what they made you, a ghost. The question is whether that's what you want to remain. Alex was silent. There's a transition program. Hayes continued. For operators like you who are moving from classified to acknowledged status. It includes counseling, media training, integration support, all the tools you need to build a public-facing career if that's what you want. Or, if you prefer, you can take the medal and fade back into the shadows. The choice is yours. I've never had a choice. You have one now. The words hung in the air between them. Alex thought about the life she had led. The endless deployments, the lonely rack in transient billeting, the faces she had seen only through a scope. She thought about the life she might have had, normal assignments, normal promotions, normal recognition from colleagues who knew her name. She thought about the formation that had saluted her this morning, and the pride she had felt standing among them. What would you recommend, General? Hayes smiled. I would recommend that you stop hiding. Not because the world needs to know who you are, though it does, but because you need to know who you are. You spent 15 years being Ghost. It's time to find out who Alexander Reyes can be. The extraction helicopter arrived that afternoon. Alex stood on the landing pad, her rifle case in one hand, her pack slung over her shoulder. She was headed back to JSOC headquarters for debriefing. Then, for the first time in her career, to a public facility where she would begin the transition process Hayes had described. Drake and his team had gathered to see her off. They stood in a loose semicircle, their casual postures belying the significance of the moment. These men, who had mocked her 36 hours ago, were now looking at her with something approaching reverence. Chief Warrant Officer, Drake said, stepping forward, "It's been an honor." "Likewise, Senior Chief. I hope our paths cross again. In our line of work, they probably will." Alex allowed herself a small smile. "Just try not to get pinned down by ambushes in the meantime." "No promises." Drake extended his hand. "Stay dangerous, Ghost." "I always do." She shook his hand, then Chen's, then each of the team members in turn. The helicopter's rotors were spinning up, sending waves of dust across the pad, but no one moved until the ritual was complete. Finally, Alex turned and walked toward the waiting aircraft. As she reached the ramp, she paused and looked back. The FOB stretched behind her, the TOC, the billeting, the range where she had proven herself, the assembly area where she had received her medal. It was a place she would never forget, a waypoint on a journey that was finally nearing its end, or perhaps its true beginning. She raised her hand in a final salute, not to any individual, but to everything this place represented. The missions, the sacrifices, the brotherhood of warriors who defended their country in places most Americans would never see. The salute was returned by every person watching. Then Chief Warrant Officer 5 Alexandra Ghost raised, turned, and boarded the helicopter that would carry her into her new life. 6 months later, Alexandra Ray stood before an auditorium filled with young women at the U.S. Army Sniper School. She wore dress blues now, her chest bearing the Distinguished Service Crosses and silver stars that had been hidden for 15 years. Behind her, a screen displayed images from her career, declassified photos of operations, terrain models of battlefields, the statistical summary of a record that still seemed impossible even to those who had verified it. 96 confirmed kills. Longest shot, 2,340 meters. 37 American lives saved in a single operation. The young women in the audience were candidates of the school's first integrated class, part of the military's ongoing effort to open all combat positions to qualified personnel, regardless of gender. They ranged in age from 18 to 30, their faces showing a mixture of nervousness, determination, and hope. They looked, Alex realized, exactly like she had looked 20 years ago. "I'm going to tell you something they won't put in the official curriculum," she said, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "The hardest part being a sniper isn't the shooting. Any competent marksman can learn to read wind, calculate ballistics, and put rounds on target at extreme range. The hardest part is a decision." She paused. "Every time you look through that scope, you're looking at a human being. They have families, histories, reasons for being where they are. Your job is to end their story in a fraction of a second, from a distance where they'll never see your face or know your name. That decision, the decision to take a life, is one you'll have to make dozens, maybe hundreds of times. And it never gets easier." The auditorium was absolutely silent. People will tell you that women can't handle that weight, that we're too emotional, too empathetic, too soft for the cold calculus of precision violence. Alex's voice hardened. "I have 96 reasons to disagree. And I'm here to tell you that your gender has nothing to do with your capability. What matters is your skill, your discipline, and your willingness to do what the mission requires." She looked out at the faces before her. "I spent 15 years invisible, hidden in classified files, erased from official records, denied the recognition that my male counterparts received automatically. That was wrong. It was wrong for me. It was wrong for every young woman who never knew that someone like me existed." She paused. "I'm standing in front of you today because that wrong is being corrected. And I'm telling you my story because I want you to know that the path ahead, however difficult, however lonely, however full of doubt, can be walked. I walked it, and so can you." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunder that filled the auditorium. Alex stood amid it, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope for the young women before her. Hope for the military she had served. Hope for a future where ghosts like her would no longer be necessary. After presentation, she answered questions for 2 hours. The candidates wanted to know everything. About equipment, about training, about the psychological toll, about the mission in Afghanistan that had finally brought her story to light. She answered as honestly as she could, hiding nothing, sparing nothing. They deserved the truth, even the ugly parts. When the last question had been answered and the auditorium had emptied, she found herself alone on the stage, looking out at rows of empty seats. The silence was comfortable, familiar in its way. She had spent so many years in silence that she almost missed it. "You did good." The voice came from the doorway. Alex turned to find Senior Chief Marcus Drake, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, a grin on his weathered face. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I'm the new instructor liaison. Got assigned last month." Drake walked toward her, his boots echoing in the empty space. "Figured I'd come see what the famous Angel Sniper had to say. And I think those candidates are going to remember this day for the rest of their lives." Drake stopped a few feet from the stage. "You gave them something I never could have. Proof that it's possible." Alex descended the stairs to stand beside him. "I'm not sure I'm anyone's role model." "You're everyone's role model now. Better get used to it." Drake's expression softened. "How does it feel, being seen?" Alex considered the question. 6 months of transition, of interviews, of public appearances, of becoming a person instead of a ghost. It had been harder than she expected, and easier, too, in ways she hadn't anticipated. The weight of secrets lifted, the burden of invisibility finally set down. "It feels like the beginning of something," she said finally, "though I'm not sure what. That's the best kind of beginning." Drake extended his hand. "Welcome to the light, Ghost. For real this time." She took his hand. "My name is Alexandra Reyes," she said. "Call me Alex." The sun was setting over the training facility, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Alex stood in its light, finally visible, finally acknowledged, finally free of the shadows that had defined her for so long. Behind her, the auditorium held a memory of young women who would carry her story forward. Ahead of her, a future that she was only beginning to imagine. She had saved 37 lives on a single night in Afghanistan. But maybe, just maybe, the life she was finally learning to live was the most important one of all. If this story stayed with you, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments, would you have stepped into the light or stayed in the shadows? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming. See you in the next one.